Jai Guru, everyone.
Hey, Guru.
Hi, Guru, and welcome to another episode of Autobiography of a Yogi, line by line. We have Mike and Priyank here today. How are you both?
Super.
Excellent.
Good. You ready to start a new chapter? Yes, we are on chapter 22 now, which is titled The Heart of a Stone Image, which is quite an unusual chapter title. Maybe it's a bit mysterious. Don't really know what it's going to be about necessarily, but we will find out. And it might be nice to reflect at the end of the chapter as well, what thoughts we have. What thoughts do you have on this, Priyank, so far?
The title I was just going to say is, it reminds me of this debate about the whether worshipping statues in the West is whether it should still be a thing in today's modern world of the skeptic view on old religions. So it reminds me of as like a direct challenge to that. It's like Guruji perceived the debate that would come through the decades and centuries after this book, and tackled it head on.
And I feel like it really does get to the heart of that image in this chapter of Kali. I'm looking forward to delving into that more. And my other question for you both is, if you had to think about some themes of this chapter, what would you say are some of the main themes? While you have a think, I will say mine. Put you on the spot there. I would say for me, it's about redemption. It's about faith, and also about strength during adversities, and that that moment of redemption can only be one moment away from us. Yeah. Do you guys have any thoughts?
I think the theme of Guruji's devotion and divine intercession is a good one, and influencing family and friends in the best possible way. Being a good example is also a good one.
Yeah, rather than try and get them to see why your way is the right way, you just lead by example. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Well, should we dive on in?
I've got some more thoughts about the general.
Go on then. Yes.
I like that the difference. He has this moment of samadhi in this section, but this one is inspired by a devotional kind of element. And previously, I feel like his samadhi was it was inspired by Sri Yukteswar before this, Master Mahashaya and Hindranath Gupta, I think is the other one. And they kind of prodded his heart and touched him, or touched his spiritual eye, and then he went into this ecstasy state. Whereas this one, he does it himself through devotion. So I think it's slightly nuanced. So I'll be interested to compare this to the others. And I also love the last theme in this chapter, which is one of Guruji's books as well, the divine romance. Because here there's a uber romantic moment. The story is really romantic, isn't it? But spiritually romantic. So the Guruji's titled book, the book Divine Romance, which always plucked at my heartstrings in a spiritual way. I think this is a very beautiful chapter for that book title.
Yeah, it made me think how when we love the Divine Mother and God in that very pure way, it touches God's heart, right? Love is above law. So yeah, like you say, it's really about love, isn't it, this chapter? Okay, so we start off the chapter, and Guruji's sister is talking. So it opens up with some dialogue, and she's saying that, you know, she's a very loyal Hindu wife and she doesn't want to complain about her husband, but he has some very materialistic views and she wants him to turn away from them because, you know, he's ridiculing the pictures of the saints in her meditation room and he delights in doing that. Yeah, Priyank.
This is a common theme, I think, currently, in that I've seen that women generally in India, and here, women here now from the Hindu background, are generally more devotional and religious than men as a general. You know, if I was going to scale it, I might say like 70% to 30% more, like in terms of women in places like temples and things like that. So, and it seems that it was true even back then, because the stereotype is holding through for Mukunda's family, not in just in terms of his sister here, but also his brother, right? Ananta was similar in this respect.
I feel like when I first read this chapter, I think for the first time I saw that Guruji's, like, we always knew about Ananta, who wasn't very spiritually inclined, but it seems like the rest of his siblings were. And his older sister was very spiritual, and it was very difficult for her to see that her husband wasn't. And the fact that he wasn't just interested but also ridiculed it must make it more painful. That's like always rubbing salt into the wound over and over again. So luckily she had an avatar as a brother that can help a lot.
Yeah, because she says to Guruji, you know, dear brother, I have deep faith that you can help him. Will you? So yeah. So she gazed very beseechingly at Guruji, and Guruji says how he was, you know, he's paying a short visit to their home on Girish Duratnan Lane, and that her plea really touched him because he says that she had a really profound spiritual influence over his early life, and you know, when his mother died, his sister really tried to fill that space, that void that his mother had left in the family. So I think, you know, Guruji had quite a loving connection, it seems, to Roma. And he says, of course, beloved sister. I like how they speak to each other. I like the dear brother and beloved sister. It's very sweet. It's full of love. And, you know, he smiles and he's trying to cheer her up a little bit, but he says that her face has a lot of gloom. And it's unusual because she's normally quite calm and cheerful. But I suppose you would be, you know, if you're living with somebody who is actively being quite mean about your spiritual life and the things that you hold dear, it must really get to you. So both Guruji and his sister, they sit a while in silent prayer for guidance. And I loved this line. It was so short. Roma and I sat a while in silent prayer for guidance. Because it just says so much, you know, like when we have a problem and when we're facing difficulties, sit down, be silent, pray for guidance, because God will help you. He can help you if you talk to him. There's actually a reading from Guruji about this, which expands a little bit more on this point. And Priyank, could you read it, please?
Sure. Remember, greater than a million reasonings of the mind is to sit and meditate upon God until you feel calmness within. Then say to God, I can't solve my problems alone, even if I thought a zillion different thoughts, but I can solve it by placing it in your hands. Asking first for your guidance and then following through by thinking out the various angles for a possible solution. God does help those who help themselves. When your mind is calm and filled with faith, after praying to God in meditation, you are able to see the various answers to your problems. And because your mind is calm, you are capable of pricking out the best solution. Following that solution Follow that solution and you will meet with success. This is applying the science of religion in your daily life by our Guru.
There you go. So if you have a problem now, we know exactly what to do. And that's what Guruji and his sister did. And he said that a year before that, Roma had asked him to initiate her into Kriya Yoga, and that she was making really notable progress, which is quite something. Imagine having that relationship with your sister and being able to initiate her into Kriya. It's very special. And for your brother to do that for you. What do you make of this, Mike?
I mean, it's not just her, it's also Ananta, right? Maybe Ananta had like a kind of a role model effect on the other siblings, because if he gets initiated to Kriya Yoga, the other siblings might follow. But you're right, it's hard to imagine their relationship as siblings, because you feel as peers, and usually there's somewhat a competitive nature between siblings. And here, as when it comes to spirituality, they all recognized how Mukunda is a very advanced yogi.
I was trying to think what is something similar that I've done for my family. Obviously not to the same level as initiating them, but I did bring my sisters and my pretty much my whole immediate family at the last monastic visit to the center on the Sunday inspirational service, hoping that I don't know, one of them, all of them would be inspired. So I feel like that is probably as good as what we can do in terms of influencing our spiritual family or physical family into a spiritual family.
Did any of them become inspired?
I
Did they
don't
say anything
know.
or not
I don't
really?
know.
Okay.
Hopefully they have, but they haven't spoken out to me.
A seed has been planted,
Yeah,
perhaps.
hopefully.
Yeah, so they both sit down, they pray, and then Guruji says, an inspiration seized me. And this says so much to me, because it's almost instantaneous. They sit down, they pray for guidance, and then the inspiration comes. There's no big time passing. I think that's quite inspiring for us as well. And Guruji says that tomorrow he's going to go to the temple of Kali, and he would like his sister to come with him and persuade her husband to also join them. And he said that he feels that in the vibrations of that holy place, Divine Mother will touch his heart, but don't disclose our object in wanting him to go. And Roma agrees. And again, I really love this wording. Divine Mother will touch his heart. It's not that, he will stop being mean to you, or he'll stop ridiculing you, or he'll change his mind. It's like it goes right to the heart. Go right in. So Roma agrees. And the next day, in the early morning, Roma and her husband Satish arrived. They were in readiness for the trip, and they had a hackney carriage which was rattling along the upper circular road towards Dakshineshwar. And instead of being a very pleasant journey, his brother-in-law Satish was amusing himself by deriding the worth of the gurus. And his wife, Roma, was weeping quietly beside him.
Really, really sad to read this, isn't it? I can't stand this. Guruji handled this much better than I do, especially what we're going to read in the next line. But I usually try and tackle this head on in a really assertive way, like putting out boundaries as to what can and can't be said and things like that. On things like religion and vegetarianism, other things that I hold quite true to my heart. But yeah, I like Satish needs to know who his audience is. Like, it's fair enough if he does this in front of his friends, but not people that are just going to get hurt by it. Like, you can still think these thoughts, but you don't need to say them to people that are obviously not going to agree with you, like a polar opposites to that frame of mind.
Mm. But I guess if he's being amused by it, he finds satisfaction in upsetting them both.
It could be that he was also agitated because he felt like this was going to be an effort to reform him, and maybe he was trying to shut this down early.
Yes, it's like, I see what you're doing,
Yeah.
and it's not happening. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, maybe also he felt a bit uncomfortable, right?
I
Because
know,
he's
I see what you're doing. Yeah.
yeah, and he's surrounded by two very spiritual people. He's not having any of it. But Guruji, when he sees his sister crying, he whispers, sister, cheer up. And he's telling her not to give Satish any satisfaction of believing that his mockery is going to be taken seriously. And and then Satish is again ridiculing Guruji. He says, Mukunda, how can you admire worthless humbugs? It's just, it's hard to even speak what he did say. And he's saying that Sadhu's appearance is very repulsive, and because they're either really thin like a skeleton or very, very fat, which is very unholy, and fat like an elephant. So it's really like big things that he's saying here, but Guruji takes it with such good spirit, Yeah, what do you think, Mike?
It's also good because this happens in real life, and so it's good that Guruji addresses that and shows how he handles it.
And it's almost ridiculous, isn't it, really, to even think or say those things. And so Guruji just shakes with laughter, and apparently this really annoys Satish, and he gets very sullen and silent.
So it's like I think Satish would have known that Mukunda's not really amused by this, because he obviously doesn't think these thoughts. But he's kind of laughing at Satish's attempts to insult him. And which I find an interesting approach to this. I'm just thinking, like, it's like essentially saying laugh, like, when if someone criticizes you and it's not just criticism, laugh it off is the saying, like, just rub off the, just sort of rub it off your shoulders, kind of brush it off as if nothing happened. It feels like it's not just that for Mukunda. He's really like playing or toying with Satish, which Satish also must be quite perceptive, which is why he says that Satish is annoyed, because if it was like with his friends and they were genuinely both laughing together, he wouldn't be annoyed, really. He'd be like, oh yeah, Mukunda's on my wavelength now. That's what it would be. But he knows there's undertones happening.
Yeah. And he's also aware, as Mike pointed out earlier, that this is a bit of a plot, bit of a scheme, because when they go into the temple grounds, apparently he does this sarcastic grin and he says, oh, this excursion, I suppose, is a scheme to reform me. So I guess then perhaps Roma didn't tell him where they were going. She just said that they were going out, because he only says that when they go into the temple. So Guruji turns away, he doesn't reply, and then Satish grabs his arm, catches his arm, and he says, young Mr. Monk, which is an interesting way to address him. And then he said, don't forget to make proper arrangements with the temple authorities to provide our noon meal.
As the saying young Mr. Monk, I was just trying to imagine how it would sound in one of the native Indian languages, and then I came up with Chota Swamiji in Hindi, which doesn't sound that offensive to me.
I don't know, like little.
Yeah, but you'd say that, like for example, brother Sakyananda, he asked me to call him his Chota Bhai.
Oh,
like
that's so
younger
sweet.
and smaller brother.
Yeah.
Not just in terms of size. Like Chota also means younger. So I notice he's being very humble and sweet, but it's like it's not Chota isn't necessarily offensive, but in English it sounds a bit offensive, doesn't it? Young sir, young Mister. And then in Bengali there's a Juvak Mr. Sannyasi, or like a young sannyasi. So maybe that is like a more offensive way of saying it in Bengali. I don't know. Maybe our listeners can chime in here.
I was going to comment on the young Mr. Monk as well, because this carries so much. This carries disrespect for Mukunda, disrespect for choosing to be a monk at all, and also the fact that he doesn't want to deal with anyone from the temple kind of shows how he's not comfortable being in this environment.
Absolutely. And Guruji just says, I'm going to meditate now. Don't worry about your lunch. And he replies sharply, Divine Mother will look after it. To which Satish replies that he doesn't trust Divine Mother to do a single thing for him, but he does hold Guruji responsible for his food. And he was very threatening about it. He's quite strong, isn't he, Satish? It must be it sounds like a tricky character to deal with, but Guruji, of course, handled it very well. So at the temple then, Guruji goes alone to a portico that fronts the temple of Kali, which is God in the aspect of Mother Nature. And he gets a shady spot near one of the pillars and he sits down. He goes into the lotus posture. Again, we've got that lotus posture appearing again in the autobiography. And then he goes into meditation. He said it was only about 7 o'clock, but the morning sun would soon be oppressive. And then he says that the world receded and he became devotionally entranced. I really, really love that sentence. It kind of gives us a nod to how we should be meditating, becoming very devotionally entranced.
Yeah, Kriya plus devotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I last went to this mandir just about 18 months ago. There, I was looking around all these little spots for where Mukunda would have sat to meditate. I think some people know where it is, but I couldn't work it out. Anyway, so I was looking. There's loads of pictures in lots of different parts, and I just came across one young Mahtar Babaji there. So maybe there's that was the spot. Maybe that's why they commemorated that spot. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was also just going to comment on the Kali temple, because for me it's been a bit longer. Last time I was there was 2012, but it's quite the place with a vibration and everything. It's not just any place. So I can see how Guruji finds it easier to go in. I mean, he would go into trance anywhere, but this is a strong place.
Yeah, it's a really strong, as you say, image of Divine Mother in the Kali aspect here. Because I've seen many temples devoted to Ma Kali, but this one just like power, real power. You can even just by without meditating, just bowing before the image, you can feel it, and pretty much everyone feels it. It's like a real a rush of energy for everyone that's in that presence. And there's like, because there's so many people, you have 3 ways to approach the deity. Like you can, and there's 3 queues, and it's chaos because you don't know which queue's going where. So you're like, there's only supposed to be one deity. Why is there 3 queues? But this is like the madness of busy Indian temples. You don't really know what to do. But you hope to work it out. So we went, and fortunately we came to the entrance which faced the statue like head on, or the Divine Mother head on. But lots of people came in from the sides and they were all quite disappointed because they'd waited like 2 hours, but didn't get a front version of her.
Wow, I'd love to go there. Hearing you both talk about it sounds great. So yeah, there Guruji was. The world has gone away from him. He's very entranced with devotion, and his mind was concentrated on Goddess Kali. And again, I feel like this is a bit of an instruction for us, perhaps, once you sit down in meditation, concentrate your mind on the one aspect of God that you choose. So for him, it was Goddess Kali in that moment. And he said that her statue in that specific temple had been a very special object of adoration by the great master Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa. And that, Sri Ramakrishna had been demanding with much anguish to Divine Mother, and in response, the stone image had taken a living form and conversed with him, and this happened quite often.
Yeah, this whole mysticism surrounding Ramakrishna Paramahansa is something that requires some looking at from people from all paths, including ours, because obviously Guruji has very much mentioned him again and again, him and Yogananda, of course, his principal disciple. And we covered him in great detail in chapter 9, part 6, if you want to go back, because Master Mahashai, or Sri M, sorry, Master M, was it in chapter 9? He obviously is a devotee of Ramakrishna Paramahansa, and that is a special book that he's written on the biography of his master, Ramakrishna Paramahansa.
Yes, exactly. So then, Guruji starts praying. He says, "Silent Mother of Stone, I prayed. Thou didst become filled with life at the plea of thy beloved devotee Ramakrishna. Why dost thou not also heed the wails of this yearning son of thine?" I couldn't find the passage anywhere, but I do remember reading somewhere that Guruji said that if say like a divine moment has happened, such as this, like the stone image of Kali becoming alive and talking to Ramakrishna, or if anything else happened, that stays in the ether permanently, and as such that can then be accessed by anybody, if you obviously have the right devotion and concentration and such. So yeah, here Guruji's saying, you've come for him. Can you do the same for me? And he said that he had a very aspiring zeal, which increased boundlessly, and it was accompanied by a divine peace. But 5 hours passed, and even though Guruji was visualizing Kali, it had no response, and he felt slightly disheartened. Yeah, Mike.
I just imagine, I mean, for Guruji, it was like 5 hours praying to Divine Mother and he was in trance. But for Satish, I wonder what he has been doing for 5 hours.
Yeah, what was he up to? I wonder.
I hope he didn't get frustrated because this temple is a great place to worship and to feel God's presence. But if you don't care about any of that, then I don't know what he was doing there.
Yeah. And also I feel like this these sentences about feeling disheartened even though you've been praying for 5 hours, it's again like another little reminder that even we hear about not wanting for the fruits of our actions. The same goes for our spiritual life too. Like just because you pray for 5 hours or you sit down to meditate for 6, it doesn't mean that you are necessarily owed a vision at the end of it, or that something's going to come for you. Really, you just do it from your heart and let the outcome go.
If only,
Yeah.
If only it was just, if it only was like, oh yeah, 5 hours equals to this
It's like, come on,
experience.
5 hours.
Yeah.
Like-
Not a minute late.
It's probably good that it isn't that, to be honest, because
Yeah.
if it was that, it'd probably be like 10 million hours, and no one's going to do that. So we want these career hacks to make 10 million into 1,000, or whatever the ratio is.
Yeah. And Guruji also says that sometimes it's a test by God to delay that fulfillment if you've prayed for something. But he will eventually appear to you if you're persistent, and he will appear to you in whatever form that you hold dear. But I thought this bit about being a test by God to delay the fulfillment, but it was interesting because he doesn't say to not give you the fulfillment, he says to delay. And we got some readings here from Guruji about this, just to go into a bit more depth. Guruji says, even true devotees think sometimes that God does not answer their prayers. He does answer silently through his laws, but until he is absolutely sure of the devotee, he will not answer openly. He will not talk to the devotee. The Lord of the universe is so humble that he does not speak, lest in so doing he influence the devotee's use of free will to choose or reject him. The omnipresent God knows all his true devotees, no matter in what form they love him, and answers their prayers in many ways. Devotion shown to God always evokes some form of plain or mysterious response. No true devotee is ignored by God.
God responds through fulfillment of desires. A prayer that is strong and deep will definitely receive God's answer. At one time or another, everyone has found some desire fulfilled through prayer. When your will is very strong, it touches the Father, and the Father wills that your desire be fulfilled. Sometimes he answers by dropping a thought in the mind of another person who can fulfill your desire or need. That individual then serves as God's instrument to bring about the desired result.
Sometimes his response is no. People think God doesn't respond to their prayers because they don't understand that God sometimes answers differently from what they expect or ask for. He will not always answer according to their wishes until they have fulfilled his desire for their perfection. Sometimes it is very good that we do not receive what we think we want. A child may want to touch a flame, but to save it from harm, the mother does not grant the child's wish. Experience of peace and joy is God's response. If you repeatedly call on him with ever deeper concentration, he will answer your prayer. A joy and peace will strike your heart. When that comes, you know that you are communing with God.
Thank you both for reading that so beautifully and clearly. And yeah, and if God does come in as a form, Guruji says that a devout Christian sees Jesus, a Hindu beholds Krishna or the goddess Kali, or an expanding light if his worship takes an impersonal turn.
Yeah, I was just reading about this today in God Talks with Arjuna, and he was talking about where this is in chapter 12, verse 5, where Krishna has just revealed his universal form or the ultimate form to Arjuna by giving him that perception through his third eye, and Arjuna is like overwhelmed, and he asks Krishna to return to his normal lovely form, and Krishna does so. And then Arjuna asks, what is better for me to worship you in your ultimate unmanifested state or in your manifested state? And Krishna responds saying, those whose goal is the unmanifested increases their difficulties. Arduous is the path to the absolute for embodied beings. So then Guruji describes in the description that it's really difficult to worship the formless God, and it requires quite an advanced person. For example, Saint Teresa of Avila, she was able to intuitively worship the formless Christ, and actually, they both lead to the same goal, he describes, but when you take this to this path of the ultimate through the formless God, you don't get any help along the way. You don't get little sweet moments of joy and other things. You have to rely on just knowing that with faith that is going to come, everything's going to come at the end, because the two paths ultimately merge. But then he describes why the personal God is better. So perhaps, Lauren, you could start with that.
Mm. The yogi who worships a personal God, on the other hand, utilizes step-by-step methods of realization by which he progresses gradually and naturally toward his goal. The natural method for renunciation of lesser pleasures and attachments is to taste the superior joys of the spirit. The worshipper of a personal God finds all around him and within the inner temple of his consciousness constant reminders of the immanence of God, which fill his heart with divine love and joy, without courting the hardships of a renunciant's life of rigorous asceticism. The yogi loves God so deeply that gradually all lesser desires leave him.
It would.
Sorry.
Mike, you next.
Yeah. It would seem, therefore, that God likes the personal relationship with the devotee, for he makes it easier for the seeker who sees the divine immanence in creation and concentrates on God as the Heavenly Father, or the cosmic maker, or divine friend possessing human qualities, or just as in slumber, the unseen formless human consciousness can shape itself into dream images. So the formless spirit as the creator God can inform his consciousness into any manifestation dear to the devotee's heart. If the devotee's Ishta, object of worship, is Krishna or Christ, for example, the Lord will assume that concept. All such aspects are in no manner a limitation of God to that form, but are rather like windows opening to the infinite spirit.
A bit like the 3 lines to the Kali Dakshineshwar temple. They all go to different aspects or different angles where you can see Divine Mother, but it is the same Divine Mother either way.
Yeah.
So, rookie question coming your way. So, is there a difference between the personal aspect, the impersonal aspect, and the unmanifested aspect? Because
so the
surely
impersonal
if
is the
it's...
unmanifested.
But Guruji says here, if you where is it? Or an expanding light if his worship takes an impersonal turn. So that's a manifestation of God, light, isn't it? So really that's impersonal but manifest. Like if you, is it?
So if you read the chapter 11 where Krishna takes his this impersonal form or the ultimate form, Arjuna describes seeing him as like 1,000 suns. It's like this blinding light, or so it's similar, but that's one of the forms of the unmanifest, I think. Otherwise, the manifest form is literally what you see with painting of Krishna and the cowherds and Christ with the lamb, all those images are the opposite, the polar opposite.
But then if we can see light, that's manifested, isn't it? That's because I've read that Gita passage a few times and sort of like itched my head a little bit, because I don't know, I'm obviously not anywhere where I need to be in the consciousness to understand this fully, but I don't know, it feels like maybe there's a slight difference, but I don't know, and I'm not sure.
I think an intellectual grasping of the unmanifest or the ultimate form is fraught with dangers. We kind of just have to like just take it, just look at it from an arm's distance, that chapter, because it's because even Arjuna wasn't ready to receive it until Krishna granted him the divine sight to see that form. So for us to intellectually talk about it without even having the divine sight is fraught with difficulties, or maybe even impossible.
So Guruji's saying then that it's easier in some way for us if we can turn our devotion to a form or an image, is that saying like rather than turning our devotion towards like an aspect of God, like love or peace or light, or is that slightly different?
I don't know, but that's perhaps a question for monks. But I always took it as, I actually prefer worshiping God as the formless. I know our path our path is mainly about the Ishta in the aspect of the Guru or Krishna or Christ. But when I envisage God, I like to think of him beyond creation as opposed to this form that he's taken. So, and then if light is manifest out of that, then that's great. But I thought that it was from the unmanifest state that the light comes, not through Krishna or Christ. Ultimately, it's the same, of course. But
yeah. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I think in the like Guruji mentions in a few places that it really is individual and really depends on you. And some people prefer one of the gurus, and some people prefer like a formless God to worship. Like for me, for example, I just always send all my prayers and everything always to Guruji. And because I started doing that as a little kid, and I could just keep going where you started, right? That kind of works for me. And I remember Bhaktananda kept saying that. He said like you can you can worship Divine Mother or anyone, but Guru is God and God is Guru, right? So you can use them as a kind of conduit.
And there's such a beauty to that, isn't there? Knowing that it's all so personal, and for each of us, it's so different, and it's all right in the eyes of God. So that actually concludes this section of the chapter. But before we do, yes, Priyank.
Yeah, this kind of leads on to the next section that we're going to cover. But the reason it's quite common for devotees to temples such as Satish to make a big song and a dance about lunch and being catered for and skipping the queues and but essentially exerting their influence. Because like when you have, what he's kind of saying is make arrangements with the authorities, essentially that I'm a VIP and I need to be treated as such. I need to have my lunch, and we need to have a special, set of arrangements. This is quite very, very common in India, and I always really struggled with this because I feel like everyone should be treated on the same platform when in my fantasy world, that is obviously not the real world. Everyone should be treated exactly the same, just spirit souls entering temple, but that's not the case. Because in the next section, which hopefully Chris will lead us through, Guruji opens his eyes and he speaks to Divine Mother essentially, and he gets into this trance-like state of divine kind of ecstasy, which has kind of come about through devotion, which I mentioned at the start, and Divine Mother kind of gives him a vision of her, and she kind of becomes alive, which is quite sweet. And then he's able to kind of see what Satish is doing. how he's behaving, and he kind of like asked Divine Mother to kind of intercede in his life and give him that flower, that nurture that seed that's obviously latent within all of our souls, which she does do, and we'll discuss all of that in the next chapter.
Thank you very much, Priyank, for breaking that down for us. I would say I look forward to it. Unfortunately, I won't be there to enjoy it with you all, but I will join you the week after. But thank you both so much for the episode today, and thank you to everyone who is listening too. And we will meet again next week. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.